May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Clothed with camel's hair and with a girdle of skin about his loins, eating locusts and wild honey. I imagine they shrieked, whoever first spotted John the Baptist, this wild-haired, wild-eyed, half-naked man hoisting himself out of the reeds by the river Jordan, covered in scratches from the brush, with a pouch of locusts for lunch. First-century Judea was a Roman imperial backwater, for sure, but even on the borders of the wilderness, people still knew how to dress for the road, and this was most assuredly not it. This is the John whom we met last Sunday, in the beginning of the Gospel of Mark, a man who came to fulfill the prophecies of Isaiah, a man who came to preach the baptism for the remission of sins. And today we find him in the very same scene, but through different eyes. What in Mark is short and declarative, unencumbered by questions, becomes here a dialogue, an interrogation. And this is the record of John. When the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who art thou?" And he confessed and denied not and said plainly, "I'm not the Christ." And then they asked him, "What art thou then? Art thou Elias?" And he said, "No." "Art thou the prophet?" And he answered, "No." Then said they unto him, "What art thou, that we may give an answer unto them that sent us?" Can't you hear the mounting frustration? Priests and scholars, learned men, not to mention a crowd of onlookers that had been gathering since they'd left the temple. The Messiah? No. Elijah? No. The prophet? No. Out with it. What sayest thou of thyself? And he said, I am the voice of him that crieth in the wilderness. Make straight the way of the Lord. John is our herald. This is not the still small voice. This is a shout, a solitary call to action. Wake up, make ready. Something, someone is on the horizon. He is almost here. Just look at the stars. What does it mean for us as Christians apart, to make straight the way of the Lord? What does it mean to make ready, to look forward, to stand in holy expectation? I've been thinking a lot this week about the immortal words of Dr. Seuss. Many of you might remember that wonderful little book, Oh, the Places You'll Go. Perhaps childhood is recent enough in your memory that you can still see those brilliant Kodachrome pictures, the fantastical Seussian creatures in your mind's eye. Perhaps some of you have been reading it to your own children. I suspect for me, I probably would have forgotten about it entirely had it not been for a tongue-in-cheek tradition in college. Every year, our university president, a tall, learned, serious man, would ascend the dais to read it out loud to the entire senior class. It was a kind of joke made poignant. Because there's a place in this book called The Waiting Place. And in it, ordinary people are just waiting for a train to go, or a bus to come, or a plane to go, or the mail to come, or the rain to go, or a phone to ring, or the snow to snow, or waiting around for a yes or a no, or just waiting for their hair to grow. Everyone is just waiting. I wonder if you've felt this in these long 9 months. We've all been waiting to regather in church together, to see loved ones, to escape the house, just to sit in a coffee shop, to find some semblance of normal. But even so, I wonder if the paradox of waiting wasn't already a part of our lives before the pandemic, part of the language that is so steeped into our culture that we hardly notice it anymore. Waiting to head off to college, waiting to get out of it, waiting for the next career move, waiting to figure it all out, waiting to find love, waiting for what's next. Now that I'm on the other side of the virtual lecture podium, I look at my own university students and I smile at that line that I heard so often from well-meaning observers. Wait until you get into the real world. Aren't we all already in it? The 5th century theologian Boethius reminds us that past and present and future, all strands of time, are but alike, held together in God's hands. We cannot return to the past. We can't skip ahead to the future. The only moment that any of us can access for our entire lives is now. And this is the message of that voice that crieth in the wilderness. Stop waiting around, it tells us. This is not some passive endeavor. This is holy expectation. John does not tell us to put the kettle on, to settle into a nice chair, and to wait for the coming of the Christ child. John tells us to make straight the way of the Lord in our lives, in our hearts, in our communities, and in our own small way in the world. John was not that light, but was sent to bear witness of that light. That was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. John is our compass. He points down the road to Bethlehem and says, there. The priests, the scholars, the learned men might have been baffled. But what of that crowd of onlookers that had been gathering since they left the temple? Some of them came to be baptized. They knew the scriptures. They knew to expect this message, this man who had come to fulfill the prophecy of Isaiah. So how do we make straight the way of the Lord? Isaiah tells us this morning to preach good tidings unto the meek, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and the opening of the prison to them that are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all that mourn, to appoint unto them that mourn in Zion, to give unto them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified. Wake up, keep watch. The Lord is coming, and we have work to do. There is in this story another person just out of sight, another person in a kind of holy expectation. She too is walking to Bethlehem. She will find no room in the inn, and she will have to make a stable for a bed. But in a short time she will bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel, God with us. This is the mystery of the Incarnation. This is the Word made flesh, sent to dwell among us. In these stories, God shocks us out of our complacency, out of our unseen. He does it with a wild man in the reeds and a young mother on the road. But John also knows that God is already, is always with us. He is that one whom we do not know, who stands among us. There is no time but now, and no time that does not belong to God. Christ is coming, but God is already here. Wake up, keep watch, listen. Amen.